Hi, welcome to the third episode of Side Project Spotlight. I am Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
This is Aaron.
We are a part of the local Philadelphia Co-Heads community. We are here again to talk about our progress with building a exclusive watch app.
Yeah, well, we're working on building a watchOS app to help you study your kanji.
It's a kind of assistant flashcard app for learning Japanese kanji.
If you imagine you have a little tiny flashcard on your wrist, and that was our idea, and it would show you the kanji, and then you could tap it to see the meaning of the kanji to see if you got it right. It's not trying to be like some smart automated thing.
You would proactively have to say whether you got it right or not. I mean, this is really much more for self-development, not so much like we're not trying to gamify anything or trying to be smart about it.
Exactly. And then the most advanced feature we might have is maybe having notifications to like remind you to do it once in a while.
Right. So we are currently in our second sprint.
I guess this would count as the end of our second sprint, and we're doing the retrospective now.
Right. And so what did we have listed as the things we were trying to accomplish for this sprint?
Last time we said the goals of this sprint was to do wireframes and prototype UI, get the kanji database parsed into the database from the JSON, get the CoreData stuff working, that everyone would get this thing built on their actual devices. We would also look into notifications and then get the podcast website set up for this.
Okay, so I guess we can kind of go around and kind of figure out how everyone did on their part. So just to get a context, you can start with yourself and then say what you were responsible for and then kind of give a brief summary update. So Steve, I'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. So I was doing the podcast website setup, and then I was supposed to look into notifications. So I didn't really get to look into notifications. However, I have a lot of background knowledge on that, so I put it on kind of the back burner to focus on getting the website up, which was itself kind of interesting. And I don't know if we want to get into that right now or just wait till we do the overview.
Yeah, we can wait for that. Cool. I guess, Aaron, you can go next.
Yeah, I was trying to get the data exported from the original XML data source into JSON and then into CoreData. I managed to do that for a subset of the data. I didn't want to throw the entire data set at it and run into huge load times, or I wasn't really sure what to expect, but took 3,000 out of the 13,000 kanji that were in this data set and exported them, and it managed to load it pretty quickly into CoreData. I think it's like a fraction of a second in the simulator, or maybe like half a second or something to load on the actual device on my Series 6. So that worked out pretty well. I didn't extensively test all the data fields.
You did a fascinating thing with how you saved arrays in CoreData, but we could talk about that later.
Oh, yeah. That was, I was meant to talk to you guys about it, but then I just did it. And I'm getting some warning, which I'm not sure what that is. But
I suspect it has something to do with defined what it is. There's an assumption that's an array on your end, but I don't know because it's considered the attribute is a transformable. Again, we could talk about that after we finish up with our summaries. I will say it did change my idea about how I want to do an intro for the UI. But I guess we can kind of transition to my responsibilities was to build out the UI, which I did start creating like a skeleton layout of all the views that I think we might need with navigations to each of them. I haven't really done the key thing, which is to take what Aaron has done, which is the CoreData, and then start to integrate that into my UI, the card flipping UI.
To be fair, I just did that 2 days ago. So
no, I mean, I could have done something. But one interesting thing, when you did that and you showed it to us and you pressed the import button and it took the, whatever the half second to load, I thought, if when the user opens up the Air app and it doesn't have the data already imported, I would have an onboarding view to sort of block the user from doing anything. Maybe they would have to read it, hopefully for half a second to a second, just to give you the application time in the background to do the import automatically.
That's assuming that I don't figure out how to just grab the default database file from the simulator, which is something I haven't tried yet.
That's true.
Hopefully we won't need to actually do that, but it is a good UI thing to think about if we have to run the import at least once when you launch the app the first time.
Yeah, I think it might make sense just to do the onboarding anyway. they have to set how the frequency of how often they're going to get notified per day, right? So like once a day, 3 times a day, that's kind of like, it's almost like pushing the settings view up in the beginning.
Ideally, we probably like beta tested enough where we have like a good starting place, and maybe just having the onboarding, go into settings if you want to change that, but this is what it is.
Yeah.
You don't want to force them to like have to mess with settings when they start, I feel like, for an app like this.
But then I also wonder if it's like, because we do want to at least give them the opportunity to say like just a quick like presetting of like, how frequent do you want this per day? Once, 3 times, 4 times, and then maybe like a custom.
Yeah, maybe those just be like a recommended one, because I feel like once you give people like a bunch of choices, they're just like, what do I pick?
Well, particularly for a watch app, right? So like that I can see as a challenge. So yes, I agree. So again, this is just to get the functional features in first, which I do feel it needs to be there. So that's on me to get done within the next sprint. But again, let me see, what was the other things that I was responsible for?
The page flipping looks good though.
Thanks. It does kind of something funny, because like if I do it, because I have the rounded card, the rounded corner card with the text in it, but when you do a 3D effect, it affects both of them. So now the card is backwards. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to get around that. But let me see. Let's see. I have to get my build to run on a watch. That's on me.
Which watch are you running?
Series 3.
Okay, good. Yeah, you're the Series 3. Okay, so we got 2 Series 6s and a Series 3.
Yes.
We'll see if that affects the performance.
Yeah, the Series 3 is the one we have to worry about.
All right, cool. So that's about it for our summaries and follow-ups. Do you feel like there's anything that you felt like that you were running into in terms of like, oh, I didn't have enough time, or I'm struggling with getting some of these tasks done?
For me, when I did get it running on my watch, I had to do it like several times. It's like Xcode kept forgetting how to connect to my watch or something. Like I just went and redid it from scratch several times.
Are you connecting wirelessly or?
Well, I mean the watch is, but the phone I plugged in.
Yeah, I was having problems with the wireless to the phone, but as soon as I plugged in my phone, then it worked.
Yeah, that helped a lot. Made it much more consistent. It's just weird. What would happen? It would be like kind of like the simulator would just kind of spin.
Which simulator version were you running?
Series 7.
I was running Series 6 to match my own device, but I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I noticed that I think I don't know if Xcode's changed, because I didn't do a lot of watch stuff before, but it really wanted to kind of like always send it to my watch when I would run in the preview on SwiftUI preview. You can hit the play button to actively get to preview. Well, it's like once I got it working on the watch at one point, it just kind of like kept going to the watch, and it took me a while to try to make it stop going to the watch. Like I wanted you to do it in the SwiftUI preview. So some of that's just maybe not being super familiar with the how this stuff works on the latest Xcode. But yeah, aside from some Xcode issues, and then on the website side, I had to learn the Hugo engine that we use and the whole GitHub setup we have and Circle CI and things.
And for phillycoco.org. Yeah. It's actually been kind of funny because it's developed and put up there by our old friend Mike Zornick, who just wanted to explore Hugo and just build a website using that framework. But it's been robust for most of our needs.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about some of the interesting highlights from that, because I think it is a pretty useful way to make a quick website for a project like this.
Are we going to do a website for the actual app?
I think, well, we could do it one of two ways, right? We could put it on the Philly Coco website on a page of like, or maybe like an extension of the podcast page. I guess we can figure that out and take advantage of the fact that, because there's no real reason for most people to go to the Philly Coco website. So we might as well put that as like a page there.
Sure.
To sort of promote this app if we need. The only other thing I could think of that would be a smart decision, or maybe a smart decision, who knows, is to put this on a GitHub page and then maybe like buy a domain, like a quick domain for about a year or two. Honestly, I don't think it's a big deal to do for a watch app.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
Yeah, but getting this to work, getting the podcast area up was good way to learn how to do this with if we're gonna put it on the Philly Cooker website, because at least the podcast, I had some content. I didn't really have to think about how to, what I was doing. Not a designer either, so it doesn't look great, but it works.
I mean, that's the thing is like, I'm like, Mike is not either, even though he has a particular aesthetic style. He goes, well, he prefers.
If you're not familiar, Hugo is a static website generator. So the way it works is we have a GitHub repo that I checked out that I didn't realize I had access to. But
You're one of the team, so
I know that someone added me a long time ago. So I checked it out, and then there's a certain specific directory structure that Hugo has, and one of those directories is content directory, and that's pretty much where all the actual content files are. And then there's a directory for layouts, and you essentially have to put content in, and then the layouts will render it. And they get kind of matched together based on some conventions of where you put them in the file system, and also what kind of metadata you put in your content files at the top in a certain format. Like in our case, it's kind of like a key value pair. It's really simple format at the top. So I had to figure out how to create a type of, just like in programming, you have types. In Hugo, you have kind of types of content. So I took the existing blog type we had and basically duplicated it and created a podcast type, because I wanted to create a different layout for it. So I created a different layout for it that had some minor differences, and set that up. And then I basically copied and pasted the stuff from our RSS feed essentially into the content pages. And what's cool about Hugo is that you can run the server locally, and it does live updating. So every time I would change a file, it would reload the page in my browser. So it was a very fast cycle to do that. And so it just took a little while to figure out where to put files and how to do things. I also needed to figure out how to embed raw HTML. It turns out to be a very simple process, but you have to create this thing called a shortcode in Hugo. So they have the templates, they have their content, and they have these short codes. It's kind of like a tag. Hugo goes and does its layout rendering. It's going to see this. It's going to ignore. It's just going to take whatever I put in there. It's just going to plop it on the page. Whereas by default, what it was doing was stripping out HTML. If I put raw HTML in, and I needed it to work because the embeds that I'm getting from Anchor that allow you to actually play the podcast, are just HTML iframes code. So I need to put it in there. So that was a pretty simple thing to do, but because it's apparently very common, so I just looked it up, how to build it. So I ended up making a bunch of changes to files. I didn't really expect to have to do that, but I did. And then luckily, to actually deploy this thing, you just have to check it in to the repo, and then there's a webhook. GitHub has these webhook configurations, which means that when it detects a push, it's gonna call out to this webhook to Circle CI, which is a continuous integration service that we are using, and then that's gonna run this it's going to set up this whole Docker instance with Hugo on it and stuff. It's going to take the change, it's going to run the Hugo server to generate the HTML stuff, and then it's going to put it on Amazon S3, where our website actually lives. And the first time I did it as a separate branch, because I'm trying to be a good citizen here on the repo. So I created a branch. It was add podcast info branch. And I did a PR, which, believe it or not, I don't really do PRs much because my day job, we use GitLab, and I mean, most of the repos I'm on, I'm the only person.
So you did a PR and you approved your own PR? Yes,
I did. I approved my own PR. I just wanted to see how the interface worked on the GitHub day, because it was kind of interesting when because I don't use GitHub a whole lot recently. So I did a branch, and I pushed a branch up, and when I did, GitHub has a giant button that just appeared, and and I was like, what does this button do? Because it's not exactly clear, and it creates the PR for you, and I was like, okay, we'll do this. But it was nice because the PR gives you a what does that stand for? A pull request, right? Pull request. It gives you a nice little encapsulated area that you can then have comments on, and you can do back and forth. In fact, Mike Zornick, who created the website originally, he did chime in on the PR eventually. the whole concept of doing PRs, we weren't sure what we were going to do for our repo, if we wanted to do that or not.
For our repo, I think we should consider doing that PR, if only to allow us to provide comments on each other's code. So I don't mind approaching it. Like, I don't know, Aaron, how much you've worked with PRs, or I don't know if we've done it in the past in our game jams.
No, we haven't. I've messed around with like GitHub enough that like I know the structure of it, but I haven't really worked on any projects where it was required. So I thought about doing it for my changes that I was making, but I only planned on changing like one file. I'm like, I'm just going to make this one file that imports the JSON. But it was like 2 days before we were supposed to record this podcast. And I'm like, I hadn't gotten anything working. And then I just end up changing like all the files in the app and pushing it up on the master branch. Like, you're not supposed to, but I figured like I hadn't heard much from you guys about what you were doing in the app. So I figured it'd probably be fine. And we don't have that much going on yet. But yeah, if we agree to like a certain style and or doing pull requests, then I can definitely do that.
So what we can try to do for this sprint to see how we feel about it, is that if we're going to work on something, we'll create a branch, maybe signal to each, just in case people need to. I assume we all know what we're working on, but just work on whatever we need to work on, and then as long as they're not big changes, just create a pull request when you're done. So you do the branch, you make your changes, and you do your thing, and when you feel like you're in a comfortable space, like, do a pull request to get some comments from me and Steve. You can also request who you want to approve of your PR, and let's agree that if as long as both approve, as long as one approves, because sometimes a lot of this happens where they try to get 2 approvals, and that second approval just takes forever.
There's only 3 of us. I don't even know. We need approvals, period. But if we want to try to do this,
yeah, it just helps with our participation, because I think sometimes I'll see something or you'll see something that is just like, oh, this is really weird and probably shouldn't do it this way.
And the way I typically do this stuff is I'll do a feature branch, and I'll create a new branch off of master, and then I'll mess with whatever I want, and then I'll push that up to the server, and then that, make a PR out of that. And that way everything's nice and isolated. And then, we can bring them in individually. We can bring in the changes, or we can merge. We can do whatever we want on our Git side too to play around with this stuff, because we'll just have these branches to play with.
Yeah. So I'll probably, so like an example would be like the onboarding view. I would create an onboarding view. I would create a branch for that. Maybe you'll call it feature, dash onboarding view. And then I'd work on it, and then I'd create a pull request. Maybe I won't do too much. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just have to do what you're comfortable with, and you feel like it doesn't break the build. That's the key part. Anything with push up should not break the build.
You have to see how this works out, because it's such a small app right now, and there's not a lot of code written, so it's pretty easy for us to be modifying the same files. So, if we have multiple branches and pull requests going on, we can end up with some conflicts.
Well, the beauty, for the most part, as long as it's not something like project related, the beauty for the most part is it's going to be rare if we're messing with like a storyboard, right? Because we're doing it in Swift UI. So those type of conflicts are resolved. If it's project folder related, then that could be tricky. But that's part of the power of the pull request. Is like, we can all say, okay, here's how, we can kind of collaborate and make sure that we're not breaking something.
That sounds like a good plan for me. And I just wanted to say one more thing about the website stuff, is that I think that this is my first time doing a static website generator, really. And I like it. I might actually use it, because it's really easy. It's nice that you can just check out everything from a repo and change it. And if you don't need all those features of some database backed website, something like WordPress, you don't need all that stuff. It's what one thing is that it's really cheap to host, and it will not easily fall down if you put it on something like S3 or somewhere that you can take a beating. It's just gonna it's hard to knock out a site that's just static HTML pages. So that's really cool. And since it is so easy, if you want to do this for like an app, make a simple page. Like often an app will have just a one-page website or a couple-page website that doesn't change a lot, and you're not going to do, lots of interactive features, probably, just information, a button to download and stuff. Yeah, it makes complete sense to design something in a static generator and then just put it up somewhere, and then you just leave it there, or put it up on, as we're doing probably on the Philacoga site. So I like it. I recommend it as an option for people making a website for their app and they don't want to spend a lot of time. The other option, of course, is just to sign up for some service like Squarespace, whatever, but they're not a sponsor. but like you could do that too, but then that costs money. We're trying to do things super cheap. So this does require more setup.
It's definitely the difference between paying $25 or something in that range a month versus $1 to $2.
Yeah, I don't want you to gloss over like the setup of the continuous integration. You got lucky that it was set up for you. I went down like a whole rabbit hole of looking in for a project I was trying to do. And it's not that it's hard, it's just there's a lot of decisions to be made. It's not like that the process is that hard. It's just that when you use like, which static site generator and which continuous integration thing am I going to use to actually do, and where am I going to deploy it to?
Yeah. And this is why I actually liked the fact that it was already set up, because I'm just probably going to steal the whole Philacoga setup and just do it for something else. Because as you said, I don't want to think about it. And like we have something that works, might as well start there, right? And is this repository private or?
That's actually public.
That means that if you're listening to this and you want to see an example of how Hugo works and Circle CI, you could see that stuff on our public repo. Where is it? On the Philly Coconuts.
You could just host it in GitHub pages. I think is the most direct way. If you want more control. And you can also use GitHub pages with Hugo. There's like a thing.
So in fact, even easier than Hugo would be just use GitHub pages because it's built in. My point is a static website is an option to consider for your app website, because once you build it, it's easy to maintain and it's familiar. Anybody, even people who only have rudimentary HTML, CSS experience, can build a basic website.
Yeah, there's like all these templates already available for Hugo if you don't want to build your own templates and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And if money is the most important thing, like if you really don't want to be spending $20 a month for this, which is totally understandable, especially doing a side project, you can, once you figure out how to do this once, you can just do it for every side project app you do. And you can have a whole bunch of pages.
Yeah. The hardest part, I think, is actually just making the decision of which template, which generator, and then which template, and what hosting thing you need. Yeah.
Part of our mission here is to get past our analysis paralysis. At least I have that. And I think, Aaron, you've expressed that.
Yeah, definitely.
So every time I encounter something that works now, I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to worry about like the little issues around it. The things that are not perfect, whatever, I don't care. I'm just going to do it.
I remember one of the interesting things about like comic book artists or people who have these really sort of repetitive tight deadlines is that they only have about a week or two to produce their work. And so you speed through, you kind of you don't get too precious about what you're producing. You just boom, 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 boom. Onto the next project. You get better, and you're going to get better over time. And that's what tends to happen. If you look at any comic book artists' long careers, you kind of see that they develop tricks and techniques utilizing the public space in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, and with software development here, there's so many things involved and so many choices to make, and it's useful, I think, especially if you're earlier in your career or doing the stuff, that to have examples of stuff that just works and you can just use it. You can just start here, do this, it will work. We're not saying this is the best way of doing things, not saying this is the best way for you to do things for this particular project, but like we know this works to a degree, so give us a shot, start here. And I like that, because the biggest problem I have with the analysis paralysis, the biggest problem I have is you start with that blank page, you start with that blank Xcode window or that blank wireframe tool window or something, and then you're like, how do I start? And that's where it's helpful to look at examples. Something like Swift UI is great because it has default user interface. It builds for you. So if you put a list, it creates a list in a style that is good enough for an app. It's the way that Apple says this is pretty good. If you create navigation views, it's like this is the way it is. You don't have to think about all the details. And so I like tools that help you to get over that initial hump?
I think we are doing a pretty. I think we're trying to make sure we keep our scope, reasonable for this first version.
Yeah,
this first
that's
iteration.
very important. So, so I don't really think there's anything else to talk about for the website for now. You can go check it out at phillycoca.org. There's a podcast button.
I am curious. So I've reviewed the core data stack, or the core data work that you've done, Aaron. And I think that's interesting because you had to add sort of like arrays for an attribute, or you use something like a transformable, as a transformable attribute for, I think, the hiragana and
The meaning, like in English translation. Yeah.
the meanings, yeah, because they themselves come in as arrays. Thought that was an interesting approach, because it's almost like a binary. What was the decision behind that?
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a well-reasoned answer on why I chose that, I don't really have one. I just kind of realized that we have arrays, and then I Googled, like, how do I get arrays working in CoreData? And that this was the first thing that came up really the only thing that came up of how you implement it without like writing a whole bunch of custom classes and things. Like, this is how you get it to work with the default implementation of CoreData and leaving everything as default as possible. Yeah, I do get some warning of like, oh, this is like an unsafe way to do things, but it does work apparently, but I don't know if it's the best implementation. It's just the first thing that I got to work. So if you look in, if you're actually looking in the project, and when you set up your CoreData data model file that has your entities and your attributes, instead of saying like, oh, I have a string for this attribute, for our data, there's like multiple meanings for each character. So I want to bring in an array from the data. So instead of saying, oh, there's a string, you say it's a transformable, which allows you to just put in the Xcode attribute editor for that entity, you can say transformable, and then in custom class, all you do is put like string bracket, like say it's an array of strings, and that's all you have to do to get it to import an array, instead of just like a single string for that attribute. I don't know. I'm not sure why. I just didn't do enough research of like why that works or what it's doing, but so.
It looked like the database got imported twice when I was testing it, like yesterday.
Or 3 times. So I'm not entirely sure how that's working, because I've tried to delete the app and then reinstall it and then do the import, and it's still like brought 2 or 3.
Or was that a UI bug?
It could have been a UI bug.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to like not allow it once it's imported, which is definitely something I want to add, that some kind of flag somewhere that checks whether there's any data in the database before it tries to import. But I did the bare minimum of add a button that you tap on and it runs. So I was like just trying to figure out where am I going to run this, and I stuck a button in the list view just to get it to work. Yeah, obviously this is nowhere near the final implementation, but I just wanted to see whether this worked.
Actually, I've added that code. So I added a sort of like is count greater than something? Is the array greater than 0? And if it is, don't show that import button. But I don't have anything where like if you press the button, disable the button, or hide the button and just put a loading screen. That might be one way to approach it. But again, this is a UI issue, so I'll look into that, to making sure that interaction works a little bit better. Another thing that I probably need to do is just sort of have a bare bones layout of what we want to build out. And so that I need to get to you probably, again, like I said last time, like earlier part of this week or last week, which did not happen. So I'm on the hook for that.
Do you have a clear idea in your mind how this is going to work?
I have a clear idea in my mind of how the core mechanic works, which is you get a flash, you get notified, here's a card, you tap on the card. If you want to see the meaning, or you swipe left or swipe right, that would define like, okay, this is right or this is wrong. If you do that, then it says that you're good for the day, or you want to do another one. That's it. And then so the other major component to this is notifications.
and we want to notify you X number of times a day, and to just use the app, or the notifications want to be interactive in some way.
I would say interactive. So basically, go here's a kanji. Do you know this? Yes or no? If the answer is no, we just say no and save it back into CoreData.
It's totally doable to do a notification that had a button that said yay or nay. Like, what does the button say? Like, I know it.
Yeah, just for now, just say I know or I don't know. And then we'll figure out the copy later. Again, we're trying to just get the functionality to work, and then we can like embellish the actual copy later.
Yeah. I'm envisioning something like the thing, like the workout notification of like, are you working out right now? When you start like walking for more than like 5 minutes, and it pops up. It's like start workout or mute it. So we can use kind of that kind of thing. And it has buttons, so it can launch the app, or it can just like go away, or we can acknowledge it, have it like acknowledge, yeah, I know that one. And then it says, do you want to look at more to launch the app? But ideally we can like do everything through the notification. If you don't want to actually see, if you just want to say yes or no.
Yeah, maybe. Have you used the, what is that, Mindful app that's on the Apple Watch now, or the Breathe app, or whatever it's called before? That will do notifications at different times of day.
Yeah. A lot of these things are similar.
So like it's just a big icon that comes up, and it's like has a few options. It would be cool if you could just show the card.
Yeah, and that's actually all I'm thinking about doing. Like no images or anything like that. Just the kanji, and just like yes, no, yes I know it, no I don't, and mute or whatever. Like whatever other options we want to give it. But those are the two primary ones I care about.
I don't know what the limitation. I'd have to look again what the limitations are. What the view can be for one of these notifications.
They do have a notifications extension that's a templated that you can look into that folder and kind of get a gist of like, because they actually do have a, like when you open up the app for the first time, they do actually do a demonstration of what you're seeing. So just look into the Kanji flashcard watch kit extension. Not watch kit extension, sorry. There's like a notification controller, notification view, and then there's a complication controller. Maybe if we want to get adventurous, we can try to add a complication, just a simple one. But that's after we've figured out everything else. I think we should figure out, with the amount of time we have, we should figure out what we want to do for this next sprint, this next 2 weeks.
Sure. So we really, for the next 2 weeks, we only have 2 sprints left before our deadline here. We need to have like basically a functional app by the end of the month, to be testing with people. So that means we need to get the primary user interface flow working. So that means like you need to be able to open the app. Has to be, when it's open, you need to be able to get a kanji and swipe one way or the other, and then record that somewhere. Like I feel like that's like the base functionality, and then notifications are built on top of that mechanism, because you need somewhere to save that data. It's going to go to the same place, like whatever your choice is, and where you're going to pull the data from.
Yeah, well, this goes into one of the things we were trying to figure out in the original like iPhone implementation of this app, is what exactly is the data that we're storing about the stats of how the user is using it, and how many things are correct and not correct. And so we need a data model for that. So I don't know if we ever really figured out the best thing for that last time. So that's something we need to figure out this time.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, it will track with the intention of like over time give you more complicated kanji as your performance improves. And so we had to track how many you get for each character, which one you got right, which one you got wrong, and the frequency at which you got it right or wrong. And that was the challenge from last time. So we kind of have that in the core, like an entity for those stats.
Just have to see if that's what we actually need once you actually start testing it, is really the thing.
Yeah. So for this sprint, I want to get the UI for the flashcard part, like the saving component for the user stats. That's on me to get just the functionality of like a yes, no, and the data saved, and then for which character. I'll take care of that for this week, as well as maybe basic, like the other settings of like, okay, the frequency, notifications frequencies and that kind of stuff. Just the saving part, not so much the interactions with the notifications. I'll let you handle that particular part, because what you have to do is get access to the database from the notifications controller, so that you can do this. You can do the same interactions. Actually, that might be a good discussion to have. Is creating a class that just spits out the exact like one class that does all the sort of like logic of like presenting the user with the actual character that they need to see.
So one thing I haven't done before is the whole extensions thing and being able to like get data from one extension from another one or wherever. Where is the CoreData database stored in when you're thinking about these extensions? Because the WatchOS app is an extension, right?
It's basically like the targets. So the target is shared. If you share the target with both extensions, in theory, I think it should be fine. So it's actually kind of funny because I'm looking at our project that it's an exclusive watch app. Right? It's not linked to an iPhone, right? So like there's a watch app target, right? And all there is just the assets for like the accent color and like the app icon. And then all the logic is in the WatchKit extension, including the notification and complication controllers. So our focus is primarily in the extension, which we actually have also the core database pointing to that target. So you should be okay. To be fair, it would be interesting. I think there is a notifications view in SwiftUI. So you would be able to manipulate that and test that out and try to see how and I know there's an example of like probably if you look at like maybe the scene, maybe like the Kanji flashcards app file, or somewhere it will demonstrate how you can actually call that. Again, like me being particularly newbie on that front, I'll probably I know that the example does show how to do it. Actually, you know what? It's probably utilizing because there's also like a push notification payload that it comes along with the project for you to test.
So that's cool. So you're trying to get a swipe UI working and saving the user stats of like which button they press for that. And I'm going to try to do similarly with the notifications, I guess. Try to get that to work. And so we're sharing the same data, which means we're going to have some kind of interface that we're both accessing between the two. So we'll have to work on that. We're going to use PRs for this. And then I guess, Aaron, is there more data beyond the first 3,000 here we put in there that we want to add into the database?
Well, that's another discussion of, because one of the things you want to have was this like the order of how these things are typically learned, and we think we talked about it last time. Of there in this data set, there's like tons of different dictionaries and they order them differently. So I just picked one, but that one only like orders the first 3,000. So I don't know if you just want to have how you want to sort the other ones. I can import them, but they'll just be sorted in some other order.
Is there another ordering mechanism that hits more of them, like a larger percentage of them?
I guess the amount of radical numbers, the amount of radicals within that character might be an indicator.
So basically, you have to create an algorithm to make this decision.
Actually, that might be useful for you to start working on, Aaron, is just creating a basic class that returns a random character, and just have hooks in there for now to say, based on your performance of you can just template it out. You don't need to like put the logic in at the moment, but just something that me and Steve can point to and be like, we call this function, call it like get me next character or something.
Yeah, definitely. Right, because right now the only way I'm accessing, I'm just using like the fetch request for the list view just to like see all of them, but there isn't any other interface yet to implement.
I mean, one of the things that the class or whatever how you implement it could provide is a fetch request, like an appropriate fetch request. Like that's one way you could. We're just saying, I like to encapsulate data access really well.
Yeah, no, I just haven't gotten to any of that yet. I was just trying to see if I could get the data in there and then display it. So that's the only thing that as far as I got with it. So I didn't start to think about designing of classes and how that works with the UI and all that stuff.
Are we just going to use the model that we have in CoreData directly, or are we going to create some kind of view model that we're going to use? What is the model that's backing the notification or backing the actual screen that we're looking at when you're doing the swipes? Is it just going to be that CoreData model because we need something to start with, or is it going to be something else that we need to define?
I think it'll be the CoreData model. That's fine. Like I don't want us to get too deep in the woods here. I mean, we might need to make convenience methods, or like, for example, if we need to do like, we don't care if, because we have nil attributes or whatever, I just want a non-wrapped version. So if there's nothing there, just give me a blank or something. We're anti-array.
Okay, we'll just do the CoreData. That's I just need to know. So that way we will we'll try that first. We'll bind to the. Can we do extensions on one of these CoreData models?
Yes. That's how I do it. That's how I did it with Fave 10. It's like I actually was so lazy. I was like, just give me the auto-generated version of it, and I'll just build extensions to extend out the model to do, if I need to.
Is that repo accessible, or can you provide the examples of what you did?
I'll see what I can provide as an example, and I'll put it in our group chat.
That'll be cool. That'll just, again, I love looking at things that work and then completely stealing it, or and then modifying it, But that's we need the more we have these solid foundations to work with, the faster we'll get this done. So it sounds like we're pretty good for next time. We made good progress on this last sprint. We actually did, especially in the most important thing, which was getting the data in there. And
I also added an app icon just for kicks and giggles.
Yeah, you got an app icon? I didn't even see the app icon yet.
It's nothing special. It's just a placeholder.
Oh no, I did see it. I did see it when it launched the other day. That was cool. So we got the data imported. We know that it's going to work. We know that like the watch is going to be able to handle at least into the thousands of data to start with, and that the initial load is the slowest thing. After that, it's just pulling from the database. So we know that's going to work. You have a clear idea, Kotaro, of what the swipe UI is going to be, and the notifications UI is pretty much constrained by the notifications. So I'll look at that and see what I can tweak on that, because I would like the notification to look as close to the actual swipe UI as possible if we can.
Yeah, just go with like red background, white character. That's it, and then add buttons. Yes, I know. No, I don't.
Aaron is going to be working on the public interface for it, and then I guess we want to try to get as many of these characters in there as we can, right?
Eventually. So that again, Aaron's going to be our data guy to sort of how he's going to figure out the order, and then ultimately get all the data in there, and then how we're going to have that how we're going to decide storing that data.
We're also going to need to make decisions based upon the user stats as they're coming in. So this is all things that, Aaron, your insight might be very valuable as we're working on this, just to over the next 2 weeks, just to be like, does this make any sense? Is this enough data? Can I make these determinations? Because we're going to need to determine what card to next show, or what card to include in a notification to next show, and then so that whole system has not really been thought out yet.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss it, I guess, after this.
We'll figure it out. So yeah, so what's our goals? Let's just to wrap it up. Our goals for next week.
The ones I've written down here, I have working prototype, swipe UI, and save user stats for Kotaro, notification interactions for me, and public interface for the Kanji database for Aaron.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then at the end of that, if we actually accomplish these 3 things at the end of the next sprint, we will almost have like a working prototype. I mean, it'll almost be working. It'll probably be really rough and need tweaks, but we'll have all the main pieces we need for it.
Exactly.
And because we want to have time in December to do the polishing and all the App Store Connect BS that we're going to need to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, that will be a topic for next sprint.